Thank you, Lance. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight virtually. Hopefully at some point we will get to do something in person when the plague is over. So tonight's lecture that I'm going to be giving is on, as Lance said, cursed and enchanted objects in Scottish history. We'll be discussing three cursed objects as they are, and two particularly interesting enchanted objects as they are. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Evelyn Hollow. I'm a paranormal psychologist based in Edinburgh. I'm also a writer and various other miscellaneous things. And recently, probably my most recent work is The Battersea Poltergeist for the BBC, which was a podcast series that was slightly different to how things are done normally. So we had drama recreation, but then also documentary in the second half. So myself and Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who some of you might have been familiar with, is a very well-known parapsychologist. We're trying to basically solve a cold case, a poltergeist case. And it's had an incredible amount of reception, and we are hoping to potentially do more. Outside of that, I was previously a lecturer at Queen Margaret University. I studied primarily as a forensic psychologist for several years and then swapped to parapsychology. I did my master's there. And so now it's mostly consulting and lecturing and investigating strange things and writing on strange things. The reason we chose this topic really for tonight was that I find that when I'm investigating cases or when I'm researching or writing on them, that sometimes it's not about the area or the people involved or the history or the house. It's always a house in particular, but rather a singular object. And particularly throughout Scottish history, we've had several of these. Obviously, Scotland has quite a lot of famous stones in particular, but there are other objects as well. And became interested as to why we never really discuss individual objects and how we not only have interacted with them and the folklore that goes with them, but also from a parapsychological aspect. What were they supposed to have power? If they did have power, how did they get that power? And then also looking broader at the more sort of paranormal anthropological aspects of, well, what did they enact at the time? Some of these weren't just stories or things to scare children or warnings and things like that. Some of them did have significant value, whether it was to clan leaders at the time or to church leaders. And so they kind of interacted with Scotland's political history and anthropological history and have had a lasting effect. And some of them are just outright strange. So that is what we're going to be discussing. The first of these is the fairy flag of Dunvegan Castle, which is really well known and has a huge chunk of history attached to it, but it is absolutely fascinating in terms of its interactions with the history of Scotland and its politics. Now, the fairy flag of Dunvegan Castle is a prominent heirloom of the chiefs of the Clan MacLeod, and alongside the Dunvegan Cup and Sir Rory Moore's horn, it is held at Dunvegan Castle. Now, the flag itself is actually made of a fine silk and a yellow-brown. It's hard to get the exact colour known right because some people believe it's yellow that's worn down to brown throughout time. Some people believe it was always brown. Very difficult just because of the age of it. It measures approximately 18 inches and it is a square in shape. It has been examined numerous times over the centuries by a variety of specialists and individuals, and it is really incredibly tattered, as you'll have seen in the first picture. Now, the flag is covered in small red elf dots, as they're known. And in the early part of the 19th century, the flag was also marked with small crosses. But these have since disappeared. And when we say disappeared, I don't mean like they magically disappeared. There's several accounts of the flag with the crosses on them, but they believe that things were added or taken off from the flag. So at one point they had been described it, and they believed that later they were basically unpicked, and the stitching was unpicked from the flag. Now, Sir Walter Scott visited the castle on the Isle of Skye at one point, and he actually examined the flag himself, and he wrote of it as a pennon of silk with something like round red rowan berries wrought upon it, which is the elf dot. And throughout history, some have attempted to associate the flag with the Crusades or even a raven banner, which is something that is said to have been used by various Viking leaders in the British Isles. However, The flag has actually been dated by experts, and they believe that they can date it to between the 4th and 7th century. And this is, of course, several hundred years before the Crusades. You'll forgive there's a typo there. But however, its core legend stems from that of the Fae. And there are multiple versions of the lore regarding how exactly the flag came to be in the possession of the clan and what its intended purpose is. Now, chiefly among the lore are the following. Firstly, that the flag was a gift from the fairies to an infant chieftain, that it was a gift to a chief from a departing fairy lover, or that it was a reward for defeating an evil spirit. There are also multiple different powers attributed to the fairy flag, and these include the ability to multiply a clan's military forces, the ability to save the lives of certain clan folk, the ability to cure a plague on cattle, the ability to increase the chances of fertility, and the ability to bring herring into the loch at Dunvegan. For some reason, the last one always makes me laugh because I don't know why. We have a magical flag that's supposed to be gifted by fairies, and it has things like fertility and, saving lives, doubling how many people you have in your army, but also herring for good measure. Really bizarre. Some traditions also relate that if the flag were to be unfurled and waved more than 3 times, it would either vanish or lose its powers forever. Now, the picture on the left here is the fairy flag itself, and there is also the cup and the horn together. That's the 3 heirlooms, and they are still, to the best of my knowledge anyway, still held at Dunvegan Castle in Aliscad to this day. Now, clan tradition tells us basically that the fairy flag was entrusted to a family of hereditary standard bearers. Now, this means that only certain people were allowed to carry or bear the flag, and it was essentially one bloodline or one family who were given that job, and that was their sole purpose, essentially. And particularly only the eldest male of this family was ever allowed to actually unfurl it. Now, historical texts recount that the flag was unfurled at several clan battles in the 15th and 16th centuries. The flag's magical powers are said to have won at least one of them. Now, another 19th century tradition linked the flag to a prophecy which foretold the downfall of Clan MacLeod, but it is also prophesied that in the far distant future, the clan would regain its power and raise its honour higher than ever before. And in the mid-20th century, the fairy flag was said to have extinguished a fire at Dunvegan Castle. Basically, the story goes the building was on fire, and as they were taking the flag out to safety, as it passed through one of the halls, the fire was extinguished. It's also said to have given luck to servicemen who were flying bombing missions in the Second World War. And this particular story was that the current chief of the clan at the time, who was a woman, I think from the top of my head, it's Ailey, I think, Ailey MacLeod or Eileen MacLeod. One of her descendants, sons, grandsons, etc., had a picture of the flag which he kept in his in his jacket pocket, basically in his wallet or in his jacket pocket, when he was flying bombing missions in the Second World War, and he believed that this essentially saved his life or kept him alive during the war. So it's not something, this object isn't just something that had superstitious or paranormal beliefs attributed to it or powers attributed to it hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but it was also something that was still happening in the 20th century. It was still a modern enchanted object. And now, of all the documents that pertain to the flag, the most detailed is probably the Bannatyne Manuscript, and that was created in approximately 1830. Now, according to the Bannatyne Manuscript, the fairy flag was unfurled during the Battle of Glendale, which the manuscript states to have been fought in about 1490. And at one point during this conflict, both the MacLeods of Harris and Dunvegan and the MacLeods of Lewis were on the verge of giving way to the invading MacDonalds. And just at this moment, the mother of Alistair Crotash, the chief of the MacLeods of Harris and Dunvegan, ordered the fairy flag to be unfurled. The result was that both MacLeod clans renewed the battle with redoubled fury and, despite immense losses, eventually won the battle. Among the MacLeod dead was the flag bearer himself, who was Paul Dew, basically, that was his name. The Bannatyne Manuscript relates that he was honourably buried in a deep stone coffin with a metal grate, and each successive flag bearer was buried within this tomb also, and that the manuscript writer's own grandfather had seen the old ceremony performed for the very last time, which was in the 18th century. There's a picture of the tomb as we know it to be, or the tomb of Paul Dew. pictured on the left there, which you can see if you go to visit Dunvegan Castle. Now there is another manuscript, and it's earlier. This one is from circa 1800, and it related that the spell of the banner meant that it would vanish when it was displayed for the third time, and the final unfurling of the banner would either gain the clan a complete victory over their enemies or meant that the clan was to suffer total extinction. And the writer of the 1800 manuscript went on to state that the temptation for unfurling the flag for the third and final time was always resisted, and that at the time of his writing there was not much chance of it ever being unfurled again, since it was in such a damaged state, which we have seen from the pictures. Now this links into a prophecy that was told by Norman MacLeod, which is a possible retelling of a prophecy by the Brahman seer. And this was said by Norman. The prophecy goes that when the maidens of MacLeod, which are pictured on the right, these are the famous stones off the coast, when the maidens of MacLeod become the property of a Campbell, when a fox had young ones in one of the turrets of the castle, and particularly when the fairy enchanted banner should be for the last time exhibited, then the glory of the MacLeod family should depart. A great part of the estate should be sold to others, so that a small boat would carry all gentlemen of the name of MacLeod across Loch Dunvegan, but that in times far distant another John Brake should arise, who should redeem those estates and raise the powers and honours of the house to a higher pitch than ever. Now, Norman MacLeod actually stated that he saw part of this prophecy fulfilled, because when he was a young lad, there was a smith who worked at Dunvegan Castle who had essentially told him in secret that they were planning to take tools up and open the special box that the flag was kept in to have a look at it. And Norman begged to be allowed to come to this, but he was told he could, but if he didn't tell anybody, essentially. And after this took place, he stated that a fox in the grounds of the castle gave birth to cubs in one of the turrets. Obviously, the flag had been unfurled at supposed third time, and he also stated that either, and there's conflicting documents about this, but whether or not maidens, or at least part of them, were then moved over into the property of the Campbell area, or whether or not it was descendancy or someone descended from or linked to the Campbell clan was involved in part of the land transaction. But there's quite a few conflicting documents about that particular one. And he stated that although he had seen the first few points of the prophecy be completed, he was glad that not all of them had come to pass, because of course this would mean that the MacLeod clan would fall into disarray, essentially, and would be obliterated. But there are documents pertaining to it, although some of it overlaps with or is similar to a prophecy that was given by Brahan the seer. So some people think that Norman MacLeod quite possibly did experience these events, but he has them confused with points that are in the Brahan seer prophecy, and then he's then sort of mapped this whole prophecy, and then sort of mapped it onto that, and then basically reshuffled it to be specific or centric to the Clan MacLeod. Now, one origin story of the flag tells us, there's three in total, but the two most sort of prominent origin stories of the flag tells us how one of the chiefs of Clan MacLeod married a fairy. However, after 20 years, she is forced to leave him and return to her lands in the realm of the Fae. She bade farewell to the chief at the Fairy Bridge, which still stands to this day. It's about 3 miles, approximately, I think, give or take, from Dunvegan Castle. And that she gave him the flag basically as a parting gift. Now, she promised that if it was waved at times of danger and distress, help would be given on 3 occasions. And a similar tradition, which was related by John Arnott MacCulloch, stated that although the fairy's gift had the power to save both her husband and his clan, afterwards an invisible being would come to take both the flag and its bearer away, never to be seen again. And another origin story of the flag is to do with a lullaby. And it states that on an autumn night, a beautiful fairy visited Dunvegan Castle, and she passed through several closed doors and entered the nursery, where the infant heir to the chief was lying in his cradle. The nursemaid, who was within the room as well, was rendered powerless by a spell and could only watch as the fairy took the infant on her knee and sang him a lullaby. This song was so remarkable that it was imprinted upon the nursemaid's memory, and later she lulled the baby asleep by singing the same song. R.C. MacLeod stated that over time, it was believed that any infant of the chiefly family to whom this lullaby was sung would be protected by the power of the fairies. And there is documentation supporting that the family never hired for years a nursemaid who did not know the lullaby. It did become a strong, moniker or leitmotif, I think is probably the correct term, within the family. And R.C. MacLeod himself states that when his younger brother was born, they had someone specially come into the castle and sing the lullaby. And lo and behold, his brother did actually later become a chief of the Clan MacLeod. In fact, his brother was the 27th, I believe that's right, the 27th clan chief of MacLeod. So, whether they believed in it or not, they certainly took it very, very seriously. But this, as well as having importance for the kind of political fate of Scotland at the time in terms of the clans and their land and things like that, it also being used in battle, regardless of whether or not it did have paranormal or special properties, it did have an effect, because if people believed, the flag is really their object of reverence. It's really an icon of who they are and what it stands for and part of their clan. And when it's unfurled at battle, regardless of whether it has supernatural powers or anything about it, it's undeniable that it did have an effect, because at least one battle was won due to people being reinvigorated just by it being unfurled. So in a way, it absolutely does have power, regardless of whether it's paranormal or not.